It is 9 a.m. Friday, September 20th. This is Beach Preservation Ad Hoc Committee meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and public were duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. A couple items on our agenda today, looking at funding mechanisms to consider for beach renourishment work. We'll look at the next couple of meetings. Desiree's got lined up folks that are using the Army Corps so we can understand their experience from Folly and Edisto. And then we also, I think, want to look at the financial model that our financial advisor has put together for us today, and we can do some of that on live TV and make changes as we want to discuss that. So in your packet was a couple of pages that Desiree and Douglas had put together, and Deborah, looking at the revenue options. Desiree, you want to do that first, or?
Sure.
Yeah, let's do that if we don't mind. So we had, this is from months ago meeting that we had put ideas down around revenue ideas. Staff has gone away and looked at some potential revenue numbers for each one of these items. And then the second page, bottom of the second page, is a whole laundry list of items that will be longer term that will need our lobbyists involved and some state help involved on most of those at the end. So Desiree or Douglas, either one?
Yes, sure. I can talk through the document that was shared with the agenda on Wednesday. Not much has changed other than on the second page you can see a very high level estimate of what some of these changes could generate in terms of revenue for the city. I do want to note that these are the only options that are available to the city to raise revenue, whether it's for beach renourishment or it's a different capital projects. It's all inclusive. So I did want to make that point. Beach, the first one that we included was beach franchises.
Desiree, can I just, and you're making that point, because if we wanted, these other conversations we've had about additional A-tax, I mean, all that's going to be legislative change that we need.
Correct. I'm not sure why my screen is, Scott, what are you looking at? Can you see my screen?
And I think, Mayor, we have talked, the city council constantly talks about projects, the need for revenue. So these are the only levers for anything that we wanted to do for the city in its entirety.
Yeah. Desiree, all I'm seeing is your name up on the screen.
Okay, yeah, I'm having it's the loading symbol, the circle, like loading when I clicked share my screen. So just.
It's not working, yeah.
It says not responding. So I'm going to try to close and open it up again. And if the Zoom meeting is canceled, I'll turn it on again. I really wanted Scott to be able to see. He has what we're going to talk about and assumptions and the options to consider, but the model that we're going to look at after, wanted him to be able to see it.
And then, anybody live streaming will be able to see it or not? Because the camera's not on the screen. Okay.
It's on the city's website, not the model, but everything else. All right. Scott, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, let's give it another shot.
Are you trying to share the two pages?
I was trying. Well, yeah, maybe let's do that. Maybe I'll just try to share the model when we get there.
Yeah, we're trying to share the
I was just wondering, I could try to share it from my screen.
We're doing the financial model, Scott.
Yeah, I don't have access to that.
All right, so we'll go through the local revenue increase options to consider. Again, like I said, these are all the options that are available to the city. We've talked about beach franchise fees, and this is an effort to sort of legitimize some commercial activity on the beach. It's very difficult to gauge what the revenue could be until we really structure how it would look, how many businesses would be allowed on the beach. I used the example from Folly Beach. They have a handful of beach share and umbrella companies that operate on the island, on their beach, also beach yoga, some small scale surfing yoga activities. They generate about $50,000 a year, so I thought that was a very safe assumption of what the city could expect. So not a whole lot, but it's something that the city can capture from those that are enjoying the beach and maybe benefiting financially from
Other
offering.
cities are obviously
Okay.
doing it. Islands around us, I think almost all of them are doing it. We might be the only one who's
I don't
not
think
charging
Sullivan's
right now.
is.
I don't think Sullivan's allows it, but
They don't allow it at all. Like, I don't know that they have the beach chairs, but I'm saying we have beach chairs, but we're not getting revenue from it. We're like Kiowa, I think makes 150,000 on the beach chairs alone.
we do get revenue from their business license because
Okay.
they're required to have a business license. But some of these communities have a model by which they receive a permit. They have, maybe greater flexibility in operating in
Right.
different areas of the island. And for example, in Folly Beach, the permit is $1,000 plus 4% of their gross revenue. One thing to consider here is we have about 4 or 5 businesses that have business licenses on the island. If the city were to do a beach franchise fee, the incentive for them to pay the city is because they would have a greater share of the business. So the city would need to restrict how many are allowed so that it becomes profitable for them and makes sense to pay for the city. So I think that's something that council is interested in evaluating how that would look like, and under what parameters they may be allowed.
That would apply to beach chair companies or.
If y'all don't mind
golf-
using the mics.
That would apply to like beach chair companies or golf cart rental companies, that kind of stuff.
Golf carts don't operate on the beach, so it would
Just
be,
beach-based.
it would be beach-focused businesses.
Okay.
The only real businesses currently allowed to do anything are the beach chairs and the surfing. And surfing's very new. We have talked, maybe 2 or 3 years. There's always been a lot of interest, and we kind of run around with yoga classes. We don't allow it. They pop up, we stop it. So, it would also give us a little bit of a additional control over those operations. If they're working for us, we have a relationship kind of with them. Could be a benefit from a control and keeping things orderly. And so in addition to the revenue, it could be good administratively to have.
Yeah. Hey, Scott, you have a
Yeah,
comment?
A quick question, how does that differ from, when it says $50,000, if we're talking about just the beach umbrella company? My concern there is it could restrict competition, and the offerings right now, just in even the beach chairs are pretty diverse. I'm wondering how we get to 50,000 compared to what they're already paying for the beach or for the business licenses versus what the franchise fee would be. I'm trying to understand the $50,000 delta.
I mean, it's a percentage of their revenue is,
Correct. What
and
we
you, and
did.
just like with
They're already
surfing.
paying that on the business license too, I think. So is that
No,
the change?
they are not,
Uplift?
they are not paying that
paying
now.
that.
They are paying just a business license, and that's included in our business license revenue. That number came out of us looking at their gross revenue of the ones that are already operating on the island and just applying a 4%, $1,000 and a 4% on top of their gross revenue.
Because if you look
Like,
at,
like my business license right now is a base fee plus X dollars per $1,000 of revenue. So
Correct.
it may not be a percentage, but it's still a dollar value based on it.
So this would be in
Based on-
addition.
This would be in addition to that.
So you would pay that same business license, and then additionally, you would pay 4% of your gross towards this franchise fee. And in return for that, you would theoretically get more clients. You would be in a controlled pool of businesses, so your competition would be lessened, but the amount you're paying per dollar you make increases.
And I would consider just, if you haven't, just check with Kiowa on their model. Their model may be the opposite, where you actually pay a fee to do it. So let's say it's $10,000 to be able to, it's a flat fee. But I might just check, because I know they've been successful in what they've done. And the other thing this would be an item that I would consider, I would consider should be like specifically for the beach, where some of these other items, as you said, would, but I think that is far more palatable for these companies who are not running on huge budgets, I'm sure, when they know it's going to their, enhance their business prospects.
We know at least a couple of the operators very much would like to do this. I think they don't like kind of the ability for a fly-by-night
Start up,
operation
yeah.
to just kind of start taking clients from it. So they may, these vendors may actually want to do this, just to lessen their competition.
And I would also add,
How would we do that?
Let's not try and solve this.
Yeah,
We'll
but-
figure out the logistics.
No, I'm just saying, I just think we have to make sure we need to take that into consideration when we're considering franchise.
And I think Kiowa and others limit it to one vendor. I mean, some do
you're right on
more,
that,
some do others, but when we can figure out the logistics.
correct. I
Sorry,
would just
Desiree.
add, I know because of we're talking about beach franchises and recognizing there are businesses, chair and umbrella businesses that operate currently. The question is asked why, how are they able to operate if the city prohibits commercial activity on the beach? And the answer to that is technically, they are allowed to deliver, to place a delivery on the beach in front of the house that they are placing and Douglas, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a little bit of nuanced here. If they are delivering, if you're staying at a Front Beach house and, we all know the property line extends to mean high water and they're delivering a service, just like delivering a pizza, that is allowed. It's not technically a commercial activity on the beach. They are not allowed to solicit or collect any money or enter into an agreement or a commercial exchange on the beach.
Financial transaction. at the
Correct,
beach, right.
correct. And it would, in order for the city to enforce that, it would require our police officers, code enforcement, asking everybody who's on the beach, are you staying in that house? And therefore, that chair was delivered to that house. So it's not a practical or realistic option for us to enforce that in that way.
This would just clean it up.
This would
Yeah.
just clean it up and
In addition to
legitimize, that activity. Parking fees, we've included here an estimate of $200,000 increase. That and the charging for parking in the beach parking districts are high-level estimates. I think I indicated a few at our last meeting that PCI, our parking management vendor, is working on really detailed models for council that will be presented in October. There are a lot of options that we can consider, so I didn't want to get into the nitty-gritty. I think these numbers, 200,000, are pretty conservative, but we'll get a more detailed model for the city to consider based on a different options, to be quite honest.
And to make this happen.
Desiree, quick question.
Go ahead, Scott.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Scott.
I was gonna say, quick question now, we said we're looking at potentially another 635 spots. Are the 1.3 million is being generated off of about, 700 spots now, or 600?
No, sir. The $1.3 million is being generated by 1,051 parking spaces that they currently charges during the season between March 1st and October 31st. And that includes the parking spaces.
Those are the 2 lots in the front?
That includes the parking spaces included in the 2 parking lots that we have on Pavilion Drive, and also 155 parking spaces on Ocean Boulevard between 10th and 14th.
You said it's 1,100 right now, probably.
1,051.
And I'll probably ask this with everyone, but how long or how difficult would this be to put in place?
Well, the increases to the existing fee structure, it's pretty easy. That requires a council action, and that would mean increasing the current fee in the parking spaces that the city manages and owns. Right now, it's $250 for the on-street parking spaces, and $10 and $15 in the lots, depending on the time of the week. There are some proposals about the city increasing the on-street parking spaces to $3, increasing the fee in the parking lots to mimic the county park. Right now, it's $20 on the weekends, where we are $15. There's also some discussions about increasing the seasonal passes and limiting the amount of seasonal passes that the city cells. Most of them are used by the employees at Front Beach, so certainly we want to maintain that, keep that in mind. There's also options for the city to increase the season. Right now, we charge parking from March 1st through October 31st. A lot of other communities all around us charge parking year-round. That has been considered in the past. I think that there is a consideration being made to the businesses on Front Beach during the off-season. They already struggle, they indicate that they struggle to get people to frequent their businesses in the off-season, so that was done as a way to encourage people to go to Front Beach. But there's an option to consider to extend another month, maybe start charging in February and charging through November. So but all of those changes need to be approved by the city council. For the charging for parking in the beach parking district, so you all know we have a parking plan that separates the island between residential districts and beach parking districts. There are 635 parking spaces between the avenues connected to Ocean Boulevard and both sides of Palm Boulevard between 21st and 41st, and one side of Palm Boulevard between 41st and 57th. Those parking spaces are free at any time to anybody. The city would need to have an approved plan by SCDOT because these are state roads. There is a state law requirement that the city, or an allowance for cities to charge for parking in the state public right-of-ways, but it has to provide free parking. There is no guidance in the state law how many parking spaces need to be free, how often. So the city would need to work with a consultant, develop a plan that meets the letter of the law, present that to SCDOT for approval before the city is able to start charging for parking. So it's a very difficult forecast to make. What we can do is look at how much revenue a parking space generates for the city and the places where we currently charge, and maybe apply that to a number of parking spaces that the city can charge. One thought that we have talked internally is creating a plan that intends to charge for parking in these spaces, maybe just either on weekends during the summer. I think what we want to be cognizant of the fact that, free parking is required by state law, and something that can be palatable for those that are off island, that want to come to the beach, and we want to make it accessible. So again, there are a number of ways that the city can develop a plan that meets the letter of the law, is reasonable, but also recognizes that day trippers benefit from the use of the beach. And it is a source of funding that can be allocated directly for beach nourishment and maintaining a healthy beach for everybody to enjoy.
Desiree, real quick, I'm sorry to back us up, on the existing fee structure.
Yes.
So we're an additional 200,000 by doing what?
We just increased it by 15%.
Across the board.
Across the
Got it.
board, and it gets us to 200,000. I think that is very conservative, but it depends on what option,
Yep.
how aggressive, I guess, we want to be with either the fee or the amount of time during the year that we
How
charge for
long?
parking.
And then for the parking district, your comment, it's a state requirement, but if we walk down the Army Corps, it's all, same requirement sits there for free
Correct.
parking.
Correct. The Army Corps has indicated that it doesn't, I don't think they've only look at free parking, because right now they looked at the area where we currently charge for parking, and that meets their public access definition. What we have heard from them is that it has to be reasonable paid parking.
Eye of the beholder.
That's right. Okay,
Hey, Desiree, not to belabor, but I think the 1051 you're talking, that includes the county numbers too.
no, sir.
Does not.
Looking at it right now, it's, I don't think we have 1,051 paid parking spots. But anyway, take it as a, can you
I'll
just
take a-
validate that for me?
Yes, I will. We looked at it,
Anyway, let's keep
comprehensive
going.
beach map. But I'll confirm, Scott. All right, so property tax increase, this is another option that is available to the city. and if anybody has any questions about the operating millage and the debt service millage, let me know. We can take that offline. We definitely don't want to get into that right now. But the city has the ability to raise the operating millage. That's a number that is placed into a formula that establishes how much property tax revenue or taxes folks pay. We can roll that back and capture the CPI increase for the past 3 years. The city has elected not to do that for a long time, and the state law gives communities the ability, if you didn't raise your property tax by the CPI increase for the past 3 years, you can roll all that back at the same time. City can do 1 year, city can do 2 years, but no more than 3 years. So the amount that is included in your list of 728,000 would be if the city decided to roll back all 3 years. I think it's a little bit more than that, actually. This figure is what's included in the FY25 budget. We developed the FY25 budget earlier in the year. September, we received the actual numbers from the county. So if I'm correct, the actual amount based on the assessments from the county is 782, and 728 would be if the city just rolled back 2 years, because we'd be capturing 2 years, the 2 years with the highest CPI increase. That's why it's a large number. The FY25 budget has a very helpful schedule at the back, and I'm sorry I didn't share that with you all, because there's always the question, what does that mean to property taxpayer, for the taxpayer? If I recall correctly, we've used the gauge of $1 million house being about $50 a year. But now I'm a little concerned about my memory with the parking.
Yeah.
I'm usually good with numbers,
I think you're right.
but I think it's roughly that. But there's a really good schedule that I'll share with you after the meeting that can show what that increase, how that impacts different home values.
And I'm sorry, just to understand, so if you did the rollback, you did a 3-year rollback, that's a one-time deal.
Well,
You move forward.
you move,
yearly.
yes.
And you move forward yearly, correct? So
Correct.
what would the yearly amount estimated be?
So the way that we look at it is the one millage increase generates $276,000 to the city. So that would be the additional revenue year over year. And that really depends on the value of the millage. But it doesn't change that dramatically, but roughly that.
It's a good chunk of money, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it would be like $30 a household. $1 million household would be $30 once you're back onto that yearly cycle. But I'd love to see that schedule.
Yes, I'll make sure I send that. So, and, the way that is an option that the city has to raise our general fund revenues to cover operational expenses that are currently paid for by tourism dollars. And by doing that, you free up some of the money in the tourism funds that can then be allocated towards beach renourishment. We've talked about before that state accommodations, hospitality tax fund, and the municipal accommodation tax fund has beach nourishment as an eligible expenditure. So the more we free up from there, the more money the city would have to assign towards beach nourishment. The other option we've looked at is increasing building permits and business licenses. The building permits assumption shows a 15% increase. The building permits is it's, again, we just applied 15% increase to our actuals for FY24. There are a ton of different building permits. We've seen that, our electrical permit, which is $25 compared to $100 in most of other communities. So there are some permits that we would be increasing more than 15%, but discussion purposes, we're just assuming a 15% increase, which is the cumulative inflation rate for the past 5 years. So I think that is a way for the city to justify.
And I think that what you said is very helpful, and we're putting ourselves in line,
Yeah.
if that's
With
true,
others.
with our neighbors. We've just,
Correct.
yeah.
Business licenses, the last time the city increased those fees was before COVID, 2019. And it was a very, very small increase at the time. Again, we're looking at 10% a 10% increase just for discussion purposes. And that would apply to a base rate and the cumulative charge for per thousand, based on gross revenue. That would generate about roughly $200,000 of potential additional revenue. And then the,
Desiree,
yes.
I'm sorry, on that one, I think our budget actually had, I think, 2.3 million for business licenses, so it's maybe a little bit higher. And are we not, we had talked last time about also including the rental licenses, all business licenses, and I think we've got another 1.6 or $1.7 million of revenue there. If we were, and we were looking at a range of what would 10%, I guess we were looking at a percentage on top of it, but if we go 10 or 15% on the both buckets, I think that range would be more like 400 to 600 or 700. So I don't know if we want to put that on the schedule. I think it would be helpful just to, we may not go there, but that's more, I think that's more of an opportunity than we've got on the page here, my take.
So the business license that's included in the schedule we provided is only, it's not inclusive of short-term rental licenses. Short-term rental licenses were increased last year. The city only increased the base fee by $100. I guess that's why that's the reason we didn't include it here, just because it had been recently increased. But certainly, it's another option that we can include on the list and show you all what the potential increase would be if the city increased maybe not the base rate, but maybe the charge per thousand, which we didn't do last time. So is that something you all want included here?
Might be nice to see a number.
Okay,
Desiree.
we can do that.
And maybe both, where there's,
My take is, I thought our task was to try to build up at least, the opportunities, if we could get the opportunities in the $4 to $5 million range or more, then, council can always say, look, we don't have a stomach for this, or the residents can say that as well. But I think for quantification purposes, I think we ought to put all the opportunities on a grid here and, quantify them with ranges so that we can know, if we're trying to raise $3 to $4 million a year, we're not gonna be able to do it with $1.5 million in opportunities here. I guess that's kind of my take on it.
Well, so the only additional one would be SDR license, and we'd be happy to
Yeah.
include that, sir.
Well, the CV, we talked about, and I know that we've got other things that we can't control right today, but it'd be nice to see this grid too with the controllables and then quantifying these items down below, like the CVB dollars, or, that's another 986,000 that we talked about going after within the next couple of years. But we've got to, I think we've got to put a funnel on here that's going to get us to the solution. And if we decide we can't get there, I just think this is a kind of, I like what we're doing going through this, but I think it falls dramatically short of what we're trying to accomplish. That's just my take.
I think it makes sense to put everything in the bucket list and then examine what you can use.
yeah, but again, the only other thing is short-term rental license. All this other is you're throwing a dart to have a legislative change on tax money, and, that's just pick a number.
I would include it as a separate schedule, because it could give the false impression that the city has the ability to make that change
To change
today.
it.
Correct, on the CBB.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you on that, Desiree. All I'm saying is I think the top of the schedule would be the controllable items, and then you've got a subtotal, and then you've got the items down below on the state and federal funding. I think each one of these below here needs to have a dollar value or a range next to them on what we possibly can do down the road, even if it's a while, it's an estimate. But, like we know the CBB dollars, it's 986,000 in our budget. Well, if it takes 3 or 4 years, great, but I think we got to have above the line on what we can control and then a below the line on what we need to chase.
So Scott, of that, so just as an example, what number would you say is a potential city revenue number out of the 900,000?
Because it's not all going away, for
Like,
sure.
we would take, potentially we could get 100% of it? Would that be?
I think that's the upper range. The upper range is we could go and we get legislation and get some relief either temporarily or on a permanent basis until the state decides they're going to fund. If we get 50%, then we know what that is. We can range these things out. Typically when you do a sensitivity analysis, it's like, hey, this is what we've got baseline. We know we've got the bad, and then this is what we've got if we can get to this stage, or this is what we can get long term. I like what we've got here. But I think we've got to fill in the blanks below that of the things that we're going to be chasing and put dollars next to them. Otherwise, we we really don't have a potential solution to chase after here quantifiably. That's just not how I'm looking at it. Each one of these below, when I look at the CVB at 986, when I look at the municipal improvements, when I look at the advocate for the option to collect additional half or a point on accommodations tax, all those are very quantifiable numbers that we could put below the line that we could go to the state and ask for help on, or our lobbyists. But we've got to, if we don't have a $5 million or $6 million funnel of opportunities, we're not gonna solve for this.
Again, I guess reality is in
It's a
the eye of the
chalkboard.
beholder in terms of what numbers you put there. And we'll put whatever numbers you all think we should put,
Yeah.
but, I mean,
They
it's
still don't
a,
mean anything.
they won't mean anything. But we're happy to do that.
Do you mean they won't mean anything because they're not based in fact the number, or the fact that we aren't actually
You know-
able to get them like in 12 months?
Or
Ever.
realistically ever.
We're trying to make a 10-year plan or like,
Yeah,
do
so I think,
reimbursement.
yeah.
And if this money doesn't show up till year 7, it's still not gonna, there's gonna be a huge shortfall between now and then. So we're trying to make decisions based off the current reality that we have. I mean, we can have our hopes, but we're just trying to make a reality-based decision.
Right, it's kind of-
Based off what we currently have.
Current reality. I mean, I think that's do we want to kind of
Yeah,
operate in
So I don't,
potentials that
yeah, and I
we
think
know aren't realistic?
I see, now I understand. So I agree with Scott that we need to quantify these numbers because it is a long-term plan. And I think we need to point out like that the first page has numbers that we can get right away, but it also has the increased charge for parking in beach parking district. We can't get that tomorrow. So that's kind of a maybe 12, X months from now, if we do X, Y, and Z, and it'll come at a cost too, because you would need meters or whatever you would need. And then you've got these issues of, we aren't gonna make the 5 million based on the best estimate. If we kept all of this for beach renourishment, so now what do we have to do? Well, if we go to our lobbyist and we ask them to lobby for these, there's a chance that we can do this. But otherwise, there's no incentive for us to, like, a to-do list. We need to go chase this money. We can't wait another year to go look for it. We need to start that process. And so I think it needs to fall into it with a timeline and what the problems are. But I don't think we ignore it, because first thing I would ask is, well, great, you got 1.5. What else you got for me? And they're gonna ask these same questions. Well, can't we tax? Well, it'll be in front of people. We're trying to educate and create a structure to move forward, I think, where then you can prioritize and say our lobbyists can get the best bang for their buck if they focus on 1 and 2, because we've only so many resources too.
So going
I'm
down the
happy to
list,
Together.
Yeah, that
I
seems to
think
be
we're
in
good.
our
I think I'm
wheelhouse,
gonna go down the list. Continue
What's the
state
timeline?
lobbying efforts to garner support of the implementation of statewide beach renourishment fund. What assumptions do you all want us to include there? That we'll receive $1 million every year as we receive this year? Or do we want to assume that we're gonna get 2, 3? What assumption would you all like us to include in this wish list for future funding?
I mean, if there's a range,
I think you put in 25, we got $1 million, and then we've got to go back and see what we can, that's in the bag.
Yes, and that is
And then-
included in the model. We've included the 1 million that we received this year. Do we want to assume that we'll get $1 million every year for the next 32 years from state funding?
in some good years, I mean, we got several million.
You could do a 3-year average. What is typical, Scott,
1 million is what we've gotten. I mean,
That-
We
that-
got
the 1 million,
855
that
last
you
year
just
for a
do
matching
a-
fund, we're
right.
getting $1 million this year.
We-
So it's a growing
Most of
amount, so
the
it's not
time.
$1 million per year for 32 years, it's a
Well,
growing amount.
but they have to be legislated every year separately.
Yes, we received $2.9 million, Cindy, to your question, for the last beach project, and that was from the state. The city also received money from FEMA, about $3 million, and that was because it was a
Storm.
named storm, yes. So we can create an average and maybe distribute that
Point that
across
out,
the board.
based on the
3-year.
three-year average is X. I mean, again, it's just information, because there are questions people are going to ask. We might as well,
So then we can include on the second point, continue requesting state budget allocations for IOP-specific capital projects. We received $1 million for beach renourishment this year. In the past 2 years, we've received about 2.5 for drainage projects. So we can quantify that as well. Pursue feasibility study for IOP to become a federally funded project through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We know that the feasibility study costs $3 million. If we get approved, we get 50% of that paid by the Corps. The city would have to come up with the additional $1.5 million.
And then also, I probably point out in that if approved, it would still be, it's predicted it would still be X years before any funding would be seen. I mean, again, it's just gonna, people are gonna say, what about this?
What does this mean? Yes. Consider engaging federal lobbyists to advocate and secure federal funding for IOP beach nourishment capital projects. I think that is inclusive of some of the points that we've already included. Advocate for municipalities to have the option to collect an additional 0.5% and 1% accommodation tax. We know how much we collect currently with 1% accommodation taxes. It's about $2.3 million. So the city had the ability to add another percent. That's what it would generate. Transfer a percentage of muni estate aid tax surplus to the beach nourishment fund. We can use the assumption that should the city either reduce the cost or reduce the expense in the current tourism funds or increases the property tax millage, we can assume that $728,000, which is what the city could generate in property taxes if it rolls back 3 years, then there's going to be $700,000 from state and muni that could be transferred to the beach preservation fee fund.
But that's an assumption that 100% would be transferred.
Correct.
Yeah.
But we can
Big
maybe
assumption.
start there with that assumption. Advocate for changes to state law that would either cap the amount of state aid tax dedicated for tourism promotion. It's currently 30%. If it's about $1 million, it's a little less because we budget pretty conservatively, so we budget 90% of the last 12-month actual. But roughly $1 million goes to the Explore Charleston for tourism promotion. We can quantify that, maybe 100% of that or 75% of that could be used for beach renourishment, what that would mean. The real estate transfer fee, I have no idea how we would come up with a number for that. We would need to know sales. Maybe we can ask Wild Dunes.
I've got that.
You have?
For the
Okay.
island, yeah.
Perfect.
But again, pick a number.
Put
I
that
know what
number.
Wild Dunes is collecting, would that be an incremental?
Yeah, that's what I was
Is there a rough-
thinking.
Yeah, I've got the total real estate sales for the
Perfect.
island for
That'd
the
be
last
a
2
good number.
years.
Yeah, we can do that. And we can also look at what the percentage used to be allowed before the changes to state law and maybe apply that.
Hilton Head's one?
Say again?
Is Hilton Head one?
I think it
I
is
don't know.
1%.
One or a half?
And then the last one, advocate for changes to the Municipal Improvements Act to authorize the imposition of assessments in lieu of taxes for beach renourishment projects. We can also make assumptions there. So we'll,
And I think you all recognize this is below the line. These are below the
Yes,
ones that we
yeah.
can control today, but we've got to build a funnel that's going to yield and then we got to go for it.
all right, anything else, Mayor?
No, let's do this. Look at the model, because I think that'll help folks kind of see what's been built and.
Douglas, do you mind, so that I don't do two things at
Yeah.
once, while I try to pull and share the model?
Oh, yeah.
One thought that we wanted to review was the assumptions that are built into the model, so Douglas will kind of walk through those while I
You'll
make
pull
sure
it
we
up.
can share this with Scott.
So currently, the beach preservation fee nets about $700,000 each year. Takes in more than that. We are paying for CSE's work, ongoing work that we do on the beach out of it, and it's nets out at about $700,000 a year. I think that is over I think we arrived at that looking at the last 3 or 4 years, kind of averaging it out.
Averaging, yes.
So that's kind of a big part of the assumption is how much that's growing each year. The frequency of large-scale projects, this is something we've talked about a lot with this group.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Go ahead.
On the 750, because it's been 9 years since the last renourishment, or 8 years?
2018.
2018.
So it's been 6 years?
Yeah.
And don't we have $9 million in the account? So it's only netted $750 a year? Or that's built up from before that also?
Yes.
That wasn't
Yeah,
spent,
that
okay,
pre-
so
yeah.
I got it,
Yes,
okay.
sir.
Frequency, currently, the model is every 8 years. You all have talked about, looking at every 6 years. I don't think we've,
We
we
can
can
plug
do that.
that.
It's kind of a plug-and-play thing that we can do. Wild Dunes versus city cost share of their project. This is this is one that changes the outputs dramatically. We started with a 75 Wild Dunes contribution, 75%, 25% city contribution. That's fairly close to the historical share numbers. We have looked at a 50/50 cost share ratio, changes things obviously dramatically for the city. The rationale for doing that is we believe that about 50% of the beach preservation fee money is generated from Wild Dunes. So we think there's a logic in 50/50. We think there's also kind of a historical precedent for around 75/25. And we've been having discussions with the Wild Dunes Community Association staff about, what their fund, how much is their fund, how much are they prepared to be able to share in these expenses. And I think also for them, 75/25 with our forecast, that unravels for them pretty quickly. So we'll need to discuss on
Hey,
that.
Doug?
Yeah.
Yeah, Douglas, what, one of the things we've talked about, I think, on the committee here, what is the arrangement on that? Is there a documented arrangement? Is this a loose handshake? Is this something where, I know there was funding, I've seen the allocation from the FEMA, the state, and Wild Dunes and the municipality for the last couple of projects, but how has that historically been arrived at? And is there any obligation for the municipality or for Wild Dunes to put in money, or is this just we negotiate every time there's a?
It's very much a negotiation at the time of the project, is how it's always happened.
And can you see the screen, Scott, that shows you the two projects that the city has done in 2000?
I'm just seeing your Excel sheet, the model up there, but that's okay.
You're not seeing the prior beach project funding.
Okay, how do I
No.
change that?
That's okay, that's okay. If
No,
you- if it's
I'm
too difficult.
gonna show it.
Okay.
Hold on one second.
I mean,
And
has
we
the city
saw-
always kind of operated just on a handshake deal between
There's only been 2 projects.
Yeah, two projects, and I do think that each time, I mean, there's a wildly different federal and state money available, but yes, it's, for those 2 projects, it was not a set in stone amount, and to your question, I think the question of, is there an obligation? I don't think there's any obligation for the community association to do anything. I don't think there's any obligation for the city to do anything. So there is no obligation as far as I know of.
Other than the fact that the city collects this fee, and half of it is collected in Wild Dunes by by those that stay in the resort, those that stay in short-term rental. So the argument would be made that they are entitled for a portion of those dollars. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not challenging that, I'm just saying, the dilemma we have right now is that I think row 9, 10, and 11 are kind of suspect on whether we're gonna get that money anymore, which is why we're having these conversations, but the rest of it is just kind of loosely coupled, and that can get dicey when the event happens.
Yeah,
And
I
also
don't,
be reminded that the Beach Preservation Fee Fund started collecting in 2016, I believe was the first year that they had 12 months of collection. So at the time of the 2018 projects, it had only collected about maybe 2 years worth of revenue. So there wasn't enough in that fund. And in 2008, there was no dedicated source of funding. So it was a combination of general fund money and tourism dollars.
Didn't we talk?
I guess I would just advocate for us moving towards some kind of a either written or codified.
That's the plan.
arrangement, so that when we go forward, we can count on it in the models and things of that nature.
Yeah, that's the plan,
That's what I
Scott.
I thought we were gonna
We are.
reach out. You already talked to them? Okay. That's
happening.
in play. Perfect.
And I guess another option, which should probably be in line with what you all are advocating, would be that it's based at the time on percentage. It
Well-
could be a sliding scale, where if you're doing it in 2025 and the percentage changes, again, it's just another thought in the mix of 50-50, a 75-25, or it could be what's been percentage of contribution based on the location.
Correct. Well, and another way to think about it too, this model is based on an assumption of a share based on the cost of the project. Another thought is, should we be looking at what's available in the fund? And from what's available in the fund, how much was it collected, behind the gates? And that is a portion of that is what becomes available for a project on the north end, rather than if the project is $40 million in the next, 25 years, can the city commit to 50% of that when at the time it may only have $18 million in the fund?
Right, and I guess and I may eat my own words from what I said a moment ago, which is we have a dynamic island. So I think right, we don't want to, I think that might cause the problem that we have a big pool of money for an area that, let's say, 1 year is in great shape, and then we, say south end bad 1 year, north end bad the other. Right, you don't want to not have the money for the resource that needs it at the time, so. But yes, so just keeping that in mind. It's complicated.
Yeah,
And thank you for what you're doing.
It is complicated.
And I don't know certainly we can kind of, and what we've been trying to do is figure out different models, different percentages, shares, but I don't know that a current council could obligate a future council to, you have to contribute money you don't have. So I don't know the reality of codifying a future
Might have
project.
some guidelines.
Yeah, I don't know that you can even do it if you wanted to. I mean, but certainly we can
Create a
have-
policy.
create a policy, have a policy, this is our expectation, but I don't think one council can obligate a future council to doing that.
You can contractually make a deal with Waldens as to how you're gonna contribute to a future project.
And I don't know that if they don't have they're telling us they don't have the money to do it. So I don't know that maybe they could, I don't know that they would, or it would be wise for them to do that.
Did we go through everything on the list?
No.
No.
It's getting progressively easier though. Well, so our assumption here is in the model is no state or federal grants. That has been
Huge driver.
that's been a big driver of our prior projects. Revenue, we assume that revenue will grow 2%, and we assume that expenses will grow at 3%. Obviously, as a driver in the out years that we see that play out. Project cost assumes a 3% increase. These numbers do not include the small-scale projects, so the cost of shoal management projects, those type of projects are not built into this model. And we also,
Should we?
and I do think,
If we look at the history of the last 3 or 4 years or 5 years of these small projects, it's been multiple millions of dollars, hasn't it?
I do think that the net of the beach preservation fund includes a little bit of that because, we are grossing more and we're taking out some of the expenses for kind of ongoing things. But I just don't think we've had a shoal management size project recently that has worked into that $700,000 a year growing of that fund. So
it is, but to your point, it is included because we do have it in FY '25, a percentage, 25% of the large scale project,
Yeah.
small scale shoal
The
management
shoal,
project.
But if we were to, if we were to do one on this end, we don't have money in there for, we've kind of talked about those mid-level programs on the breach inlet end. We don't have any of that in there.
Yeah, it was just built with the major renourishment projects at
Yeah.
this point. Yep.
And then the last thing is in the model, we have tried to maintain at least $2 million in the beach preservation fund account. So we didn't want to go,
Like
underwater. Yeah.
And, the argument has been made, should that number be larger? Should the city's goal be that we have a fund balance that is equivalent to a major project that we always have in the bank? That certainly changes
Be nice if we could.
dynamic
Yeah.
pretty dramatically.
Agreed.
So let me go now and, all right, so here's the high-level dashboard that shows the 8-year cadence for projects. Should I make this a little bigger for you all? Or is that okay?
That's fine.
So we're assuming that the project, the year number 1 would happen in 2027. We are speeding up the work associated with the permit for the large-scale offshore project so that we have the permit next year, end of next year, 2025, and allows us to do the opportunity to do a project in 2026. So this would be an 8-year cadence compared to 10 years, as we have done in the past. So the timing here can be changed, right? We can say 2026, and that changes the entire schedule. But for purposes of walking through what we have, here's where all these assumptions are included. We know that the cost of the project for the first project is $22 million, 22.6, and that assumes a project on the north end in Wild Dunes and a project on the south end at Breach Inlet, should we need that. Also, MOB and DEMO, we have that separate. We're assuming that 100% of the cost of the Breach Inlet project would be paid by the city. 50% share between the city and Wild Dunes for the mobilization and demobilization. We've talked about how that's the most, a pretty significant, expensive portion of a large-scale project, and the reason why we've always thought about if we needed to do these, we do it at the same time and minimize the cost of mobilizing an offshore dredge. And then a 75-25% share between Wild Dunes and the city. We can change that to 50-50 and see what that would look like to the model. And then you see the same assumptions all the way down for the 4 projects in the next 30 years. They're assuming, here you can see, assuming no grants. If we do receive a grant, for FY25, we did include the $1 million we received this year, so that's embedded into the model. But if we received a percentage of a grant from the state or the federal, we can plug that in and see how that looks across the board. Funding time, so here you can see the net city funding amount based on the assumptions for the cost share between the city and Wild Dunes, and then the funding type, cash. So this model allows us to change that if we wanted to change that from a cash to a revenue bond or a geo bond or another type of grant.
When they gave the $1 million this year, what is it based on?
So every year, the city sends a list to our lobbyists based on the priorities that we have for that budget year. We requested $2.5 million for beach nourishment. Frankly, it was a strategic decision or discussion between the city and our lobbyists of what would be feasible. It's not the same asking for $15 million than asking for 2.5. So that's what it is. We looked at the cost of the shoal management project for both ends, the Army Corps of Engineers supplemental work and the cost of the shoal management project, and came up with $2.5 million, and they just funded $1 million.
And the reason I was asking is, and I know we haven't talked today, though I asked you about the current status that we're dealing with, but I'm wondering if it, if the expenditures that the city makes on a yearly basis to do repairs while we're holding off until we can do a renourishment, if that's something that if we submit with these requests to show we're actually taking efforts and we're spending money, we have hard fixes, would that increase potentially what we get?
Well, last year we received $855,000 from the state. Several years ago, I think it was in 2017, was the last time that the state budget included money.
I hear that, but what I'm saying is that a lot of times everybody's asking for money and they can't, they're just saying, I want it, I need it. But there's a difference in saying, I want it, I need it, and I've had to spend $600,000 making repairs. It's a real issue. It's not conjecture. I mean, I can show you hard numbers. We really need it, and we need it for the future to do the same thing because we have 3 summers to survive before we get there. It would seem to me like if you're trying to sell that you want money and you need money, showing that you've spent it to stay stable would probably help make the case.
That was the sale for the 850,000. I mean, and we had to basically show this project is currently underway, it's at this expense. They happen to have the money available from a prior allocation for that.
You
So
mean
we're
this project,
able to.
meaning the future solar project?
No.
No,
No,
what we're doing
just-
now, the
but-
emergency conditions that we're dealing with now, the city received 855 from the state. And that was what was remaining of that allocation of 30 million from almost 10 years ago.
Have we spent into the 855?
We've spent way more than
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, so that.
That is
so
just a 50% share.
Okay.
Your example of, I mean, that is what we had to do. We said, look, we
Right.
have
Okay.
$1.5 million of damage. We need help. Here's our bills.
And they said there's $1 million. Yeah.
And they said, we happen to have 850 sitting in this account that we're going to give to you.
Got it.
So it was very much a reaction to actual expenses that were.
And Dan, the annual request that we send in every year through our lobbyist, I mean, I'd love for there to be some logic applied to that. They're in the back room saying, no, $1 million, give them $1 million. I mean, okay, give them 500,000. I mean, we can show them whatever we want, but it's going to be, the state's had great surpluses for the last 3-4 years, just like the city has. There's no logic to
No,
it. It's just
and-
whatever
and-
they feel like.
I mean, you guys, that's what I was asking,
Yeah.
but it sounds like you've done it, and,
Well, and we also
Doesn't mean we can't
identify,
improve it. Yeah.
we also identify projects that not only impact our residents, right? It impacts anybody coming to the beach. And that's why we've received about $1 million, roughly $1 million for improvements to beach access paths. That's something that is a goal of the city to, elevate them, have nice boardwalks. That's paid by a grant that frees up money from our beach preservation fee fund towards beach nourishment. Drainage projects, we've received several grants. That is another expense that is borne by the city's general fund that we don't have to pay for if we receive a grant. So we're strategic about the projects that we ask for money to show that, they are part of a critical infrastructure need of the city.
and we ever, and I'm sure we have, but approached it from the standpoint of, we're losing beach, we are losing beach access, we're worried it's going to impact tourism. If it impacts tourism, it's going to impact the monies that the state is making.
Yeah, that's the
the
hard,
argument.
that future kind of,
In other words, it
Start-
affects you, not just us. you
yeah,
know?
that's the kind of hard sell that we hear about, that they're aware of it, they get it, at least the state PRT director very much is tied into that, include into that. It's why we got the 850,000, I think, but we just, and that's the work of the ad hoc, the
Beach advocates.
Beach Advocates Group, that's kind
Our
of the
lobbyists,
pitch they've been
yeah.
trying to make. That is while we know it makes all the sense in the world to be able to unlatch that revenue has been the
So
challenge.
it's brought us back full circle to maybe the first meeting when you said we're kind of on our own. So, yeah.
Desiree, go back to the dashboard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Show the change if you did the Wild Dunes 50/50 and let's just take a gander and let everybody see what that looks like.
All right, so.
Just on the first project even.
So column Z is the one that's the one that we've
That's the important one.
focus on.
Right.
Yeah, kind of that's what shows us when we dip underwater for a bit.
It's just nice to be able to see.
My mouse not working, but okay. All right, so here's where you can see the fund balance threshold, or the fund balance target of $2 million. Anything that we can change that to 5 million if we wanted to. And, missed a zero there. And it changes the fund balance need. Missed another zero. Wait.
See how you balance your checkbook.
I know.
I like it.
So again, based on all those assumptions, the city would be able to support projects starting in 2027. By the time the second project in 2035, the city would be under $2 million in the fund balance. And then you start building up, and here's where it gets a little tricky when you're looking at the out years. Starting in 2043.
So that goes to the under the line or below the line items. That's the reason, right? They may not be here tomorrow, but if we can get those in place within 3 years.
Correct.
With a percentage of them clearly,
I
that will
think
start
that,
to change the model of, go ahead.
and yes, that is definitely correct, and I think though, and just kind of playing with the model, like a couple 100,000 per year now changes those out years
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
dramatically. I mean, it does show kind of if we could get, again, I think, a couple hundred, it's a huge number in those out years, but if it's a couple $100,000 consistently every year starting this year, it has a very meaningful impact to that column Z.
So just change the Wild Dunes to 50/50, so go to the fund balance.
Yes,
and
here you
let's-
can see, and we did that for all 4 projects.
And that shortfall comes quicker.
Yeah.
Correct,
And
the
it gets
shortfall
deeper,
comes
yeah, it gets
quicker.
deeper quicker.
If we assume, and this is all being paid by cash, but let's say we assume that the city is able to, I asked, David to include miscellaneous income. Let's say we identify $500,000 a year. Oh, not in FY '25.
In additional revenue.
In additional revenue. What does that do to the model? If we assume that for the next 32 years.
Okay.
So that could be kind of one, if we
One
got
of those
two of
items.
the parking levers.
What
you
does
know,
that look like, Your fund balance impact is less, it's still, significant when, up to 2035, you'd be able to control that. You go below your target in 27 when you do the first project. But again, this is what gives us the opportunity to look at exactly how much do we need. If that 500,000 becomes $1 million,
So this might be all of the levers in the top
Yeah.
part of your page, right? Is that?
why is this not? Here.
Your dashboard.
Go to
has
the
moved to right
dashboard.
For some reason. So $1 million makes a big difference.
$1 million makes a big difference. Here, you go below your target, but, that feels manageable to me. It would be a matter of the city maybe prioritizing other projects and scheduling it a way that you're not competing at the same time. But that's at the 50/50 rate of the share between the city and Wild Dunes, both for the mobilization and demobilization, and then the cost of the actual project.
So Desiree, can you change the model to the given this current state, let's change it to 2026, and you already added in what was on the above the line, what we think we could ask for. Not to say
million?
there aren't, right.
To
$1
kind of
million.
put in $1 million, if,
And
might be the
see
every.
what
And do you want to change the frequency of 8 or 6? Or do we want to just see if we start the project in 2026?
Let's start
Let's start with
try,
20.
just change one thing for a good moment. Let's see how much we fall short of being able to
Well,
push
let
the
me-
project up.
So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna take this $1 million.
And you understand, something like that is a great fundraising, thank you, this is a great fundraising tool, which is to see, if we move this up a year to 2026, we're going to fall short X, and we need to raise from the community, the tourism, you know, this is fabulous to be able to work with, and
It is helpful.
So if you start, the project number 1 starts in 2026, an 8-year cadence. I deleted the miscellaneous income, so just back to the assumptions of where
Apples
we
and
were.
apples,
Then this is what it looks like.
But if you do
You
that
go-
and then add the $1 million annually. So it's pretty dire
What's-
without the $1 million.
Yeah.
yeah, it's
What's the
very
built-in-
dire with that, yeah,
what's-
so that is an argument to city council that we need to seriously look at this, but then the next argument would be what else outside of the island.
So this is
and-
adding $1 million starting in FY '26, where the project would happen for the 32 years. This is what it would look like. At a 50/50 share, a $2 million fund balance. We go under, you know, we don't have enough in 2026 to do that, even adding $1 million.
Let me ask you this. What's the, how are you inputting the cost of maintaining the beach to get to 2028 versus 26? In other words, if you did it in 2026, then you're not going to have the cost of 2026, 2027 for keeping it up until you do the project. Well, if you did it in 2027, you've got the cost this summer, next summer, the summer after. I mean, how is that
That's a-
playing a
It's
role?
not,
in this?
it's not really.
It's
in it.
not,
Okay.
So if
Is
it
that-
costs us $1 million
every
to
year.
make it
Correct, okay.
that additional year, that's not shown in here.
So maybe we should look at that also, because I'm not sure what impact that plays, because we got 3 summers, and my guess is that if we really wait till 2027, it's gonna be more than, whatever it costs this year will probably be a lot more next year and more than next year.
Well, we can add that here
And you're
under,
assuming the same erosion rate going on.
I'm just assuming I'm assuming that we're not gonna have accretion between now and then. So it's only gonna get worse, yeah.
well, if
So we do have two.
But that's a maybe.
We have a shoal management
Yeah.
project that will justify, that will allow 2 major, well, mid-scale, what I guess I'd call mid-scale shoal management projects on that end, and we have an Army Corps project that,
I'm not banking on that Army Corps project from what I've seen and what I've read. It looks like it's not gonna happen.
but those.
Don't put that out there, Dan.
they're just delayed, but
Yeah.
But don't they
That's
gotta
not-
be out
that's
by
not fair.
January?
yeah, but contracts are extended all the time
Okay.
when they're delayed.
Yeah, don't
Yes.
start that rumor mill.
Okay.
Yes, please. We're dealing
But
with
Douglas,
enough.
go ahead and finish your.
Well, that number is not in here, but I think we could certainly.
Make that up, yeah.
We could put that in there, and I think that Stephen and, I mean, I think that our consultants are satisfied or confident that we could make it with those shoal management happening in the next 2 years in between now and the major project.
So it definitely shows the need to sooner than later initiate conversation with city council to start with, on the items that
in
you've
control,
identified.
yeah.
And one, showing the importance of these two moving forward and how sooner the better. And the difficulties that some of these other items are going to, they're not for sure, and they are going to take some investment in time to possibly get, and the need for those, like getting the lobbyists to go out there and whatever we need to do to be able to raise the tax and. But I think that what we need to do is, it's clear, we at the minimum need to get that in front of city council for discussion and hopefully approval. And of course, they have to look at the entire budget and how much of what that's raised for could be given to, something's obvious, like I said, I think that if we're talking to the chair people, that money seems naturally to go to this. But hopefully we could get a good chunk of what we're asking for. But I think we can't wait. The sooner the parking is addressed and possibly raised fairly, and the business licenses are raised fairly, then the sooner that money is gonna start coming in and the model starts to change. Every bit counts, and I think that what you've provided is information for city council, but also eventually information where we say, look, we need $2 million. You know, we wanna make this happen in 26 versus 27, we need $2 million from the community. You know, like, that's a real number with real action, so this is a really good
And set up a policy that, you know,
information.
a lot of the challenges happens, you know, when you're looking at the second project you know, within that 8-year cadence, whether, you know, we change that 6, you know, I think for the first round, we're in pretty good shape, and I think the city would be able to make that, assuming that our assumptions about the cost share are, accurate, correct? But we are looking at a pretty significant deficit when you're looking at the second project, the third project, and the fourth
And showing this
project.
to Wild Dunes would be part of this sort of thing to the conversation as well. And what Dan said, it's figuring that out is how that plays in. So again, looking at where we sit today, we have nice high tides. There would seem to be a reason to look to 26 versus 27, and with that in mind, I think we need to look at exactly what Dan said. If we went to 27, there might be $4 million extra of Band-Aids and personnel and everything else to get there that we might better push the project earlier
And
if
we,
that's a reasonable.
But again, I think to
But
Douglas's
there's a lot
point,
of-
I think between the shoal management and the Army
A
Corps,
lot of that is already
I don't think you're gonna have that $4 million, hopefully.
good. That's great. I
Yeah.
mean, that's good.
and on your comment about speeding up maybe the process, and how soon can we be in a position to do a large-scale project? City Council engaged CSC last year for the first phase of all the engineering and surveying that needs to be done to prepare a permit application. The second phase will be presented to council on Tuesday.
Good.
For them to approve and for us to get that work done quicker. And our goal would be to, at the end of this year, be able to submit the permit application complete with all the geotechnical analysis and the coordination with SHPO completed and the location of the sand that would be coming for both ends. So that we assume a 12-month permit process, that permit could be in place next year, and the city would be, from a permitting perspective, in a position to effectuate a project on both ends in 2026. So that is moving along, where we're trying to speed that up as soon as we can,
And
as
I
quickly
ask
as we
this in
can.
This sounds so pessimistic, but not in the world. When you say the north and the south end, does the permit also, no one expected the south end to be where the south end is right now. No one's expecting the middle of the island to be anything but fabulous. Would this also cover if perhaps something happened to the middle and it needed to be?
No, it's specific to a
It is
project area.
specific to a project area?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can ask the question to Stephen, is there anything that can be included in that permit application
just
for the
has-
middle of the island if we, again, put
We just saw
assumptions?
something no one ever expected to see, so
Yeah.
as we look forward.
Yeah, we can certainly ask if that would be agreeable for the permitting agencies to issue a permit for areas that have not shown any erosion. I don't know, but we can ask.
Again, it just, I
Yeah,
don't
sure.
wanna chase a rabbit, but I just.
No, I think it's a good question. All right,
Yes, so we've.
anything else?
Is
Wait,
it
Tim.
possible to get a second opinion? Maybe with a little competition between two companies?
Environmental company.
And we've had the Nicole Elko take a gander, and
Tim,
You're not saving any money.
talk into,
Yeah, please, thank you.
so second opinion on which aspect?
On some of these projects.
On the
that-
cost of projects?
Right. And that way, maybe there is a difference between the two companies, and we could save a little money that way.
I'm not sure I understand.
yeah, because that's
Well-
not gonna happen until the bidding happens.
Yeah, we
That-
will-
That competition will happen.
Okay.
It will, yeah.
Yes, we bid all of our, our
Yeah, okay.
construction projects. So the dredging companies would submit a bid for the offshore project.
Gotcha.
And I do think the costs that are built into our model are actual cost of actual projects inflated by the 3%.
Perfect.
So I mean, there are assumptions built in that we could tweak,
but-
but that's,
but
it was not a super scientific methodology to arrive at the cost of those
Sure.
two
Well,
projects.
just where you could save some money here and
Yeah,
there.
we,
Yeah.
and it is, I
absolutely.
mean, you do get wild price differentials. You know, when it comes time to bid, and we've talked about that if they're not around and it's not convenient, we see that in the pricing and the need to kind of try to have a little bit of, kind of have the ability to strike while the iron's hot if we know that, you know, a dredging operator happens to be right next door. Maybe
Well,
we accelerate a little bit
and
to try to take advantage of that.
I think too, if we have a permit next year for the large-scale projects, then we can bid it out at the end of '25 and just give a wide range of options to the contractor. You know, we, in the past, have been very specific about trying to minimize the impact in the summer, but it might be worth for the city to say,
Yeah.
well, it may be inconvenient, but if we
Good
give the contractor the ability to do it, you know, throughout the year, then that can impact the cost of the project if it's more convenient for these contractors to do it
But it
at
could
a
work the other
different
way
time.
as well.
That's
Yeah.
right.
But Tim, I mean, maybe there's a good surprise in the bidding process. I mean, who knows? But that would definitely be a competitive bid.
Can I actually ask a question regarding the bids? How do we evaluate the bidders? Like, when you say like the prices can be pretty wild, or we're building a budget, I mean, do we look close to that target number? Or, I mean, how do we evaluate the quality of the bidder? Like,
Well, we would have a criteria, a list of criteria that we would be looking at for all the bidders, you know, past performance, past projects,
Okay.
location, cost is a huge, obviously a huge
I
driver.
mean, Stephen has a lot of insight.
Yeah, but it's not just, hey,
Quality.
it's not a low-cost bid no matter what. Like, it's like, hey, you're the lowest bidder, sweet, you got it, no
Well,
matter what they might be able to do.
so that's why I would,
Undercut it.
I would recommend the city do a request for proposals, and it gives us some more flexibility to evaluate different criteria than just a request for bids. Bids, it's usually, you know, you take the low bid.
lowest
You
bid,
you
yeah.
can have some criteria that you use to select, but you're
a
usually
filter.
looking, yeah, there's a filter. So,
Filter before they can get to.
yes,
bid process.
yes.
And,
Right,
and
that's what I'm curious about.
I would say, kind of related to the filter, we do try to do a lot of due diligence in the permitting end to ensure, like, that the sand is good, that you know, we're doing it the most cost-effective method. And we kind of hear about projects that, like, rocks end up getting spit up on the beach. That is very specifically from a deficiency in the front-end work, that they have kind of not really done the due diligence of
Where the source of the sand.
where the source of the sand is. So we do, and so, you know, we do think that if that sand goes in that location, however you kind of get it there, it's less likely to have problems because we've kind of done the front-end work and specified, you know, it's going to be this sand, which we know is really good, and it has to be done this way. So
You've identified the product that's gonna be placed there. They're just responsible to facilitate the move.
that's right. And if
Okay.
you hear of projects going south, generally it is from lack of front-end work that we try to very much avoid
Okay.
it going that way.
Well, and a thing to keep in mind too, and you'll hit on this already, you know, this is not a online permit, you know, that we're inputting. I mean, it is a ton of work to get from Stephen and crew to get it ready to serve up for a permit to that comment,
Right.
to do a lot of the front end, to hopefully alleviate
It's
issues.
not an Adobe fillable that you
Yeah.
just pick.
Well, no,
It'd be a lot easier, but
It'd be
there's a lot of work.
Need help.
Yes. We need sand here.
I'm sure we've all seen a government contract that's gone,
Yes.
So we,
was
we,
inappropriately awarded. and-
we'll talk about
and
pros and
costs.
cons of federal projects, but I think that is one. I mean, I think we know that they'll kind of go back to the same sand source and that they've used like 4 different times and they're kind of scraping at the bottom. So we're aware of that. We try to
Yeah.
work to avoid it.
As someone who's been on the receiving end of poor contracts.
Well,
So,
go ahead,
okay.
Cindy. No, go
All
ahead.
that I was gonna say is, unfortunately, I have to go at 10:30.
We're leaving right now.
And I wanted to, just ask,
So again, our goal that we talked about last meeting is to get something, financial decisions in front of city council. So with our next meeting, what do you all think we need as a deliverable that, or information that we can then get in front of city council regarding what we talked about today?
Yeah, we've got a meeting Tuesday, so it won't happen there. So this will be an October meeting.
Well,
We
so,
need
I
to-
mean, I don't know if you want to, obviously agreeable to whatever you all decide, but I think what we talked about when we kind of laid out the schedule was that this group would have a kind of introduction in November. Like, hey, these are all the people we've met with, these are all the things that we've gone through, with kind of a final recommendation in December, January, depending on, that would inform their budget building in January. So that was kind of what we talked about when we laid out the schedule.
So can we meet next Friday, and, because it sounds like we've got some good people coming the 4th and the 11th, and it just.
We're not available on next Friday.
What do I have?
Well, we have to move it to later, but then we got John Darby.
Oh, we have a meeting,
Yeah.
yes.
What do we have next, we can't meet next Friday for why?
Desiree and I can't. I mean, if y'all want to, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think it would be great if we have an updated version of this schedule we talked about. I think that even we can, kind of move forward if Douglas is available and try to fine tune it as much as possible, if Deborah and Douglas are available. The other thing I'd ask is, can we include in the packet that chart that had all the deliverables and the timelines on it, so that we kind of all keep pace on what we were working on and what we need to do between now and the end of the year? I think that would be helpful for reference.
Yep.
And then just in addition to adding to this is then going back to what we did at the last meeting and just having that as well. So we've got here's what we're recommending for the beach, 8-year program, this amount of sand, this amount of cost, and then where we are with the finances right now. So we're starting to build the packet, and maybe if we have some extra time, we can start laying out what you just reminded us of, Douglas, which is and here's who we've met with, like the timeline. So
Yeah.
basically, let's start putting the packet together of information, since we have a week where it's not as much decision-making since y'all aren't here, but we can keep cleaning things up to make that deadline.
So we'll have
Yeah, I'm game to meet next Friday.
so 27th, Douglas, are you around?
Yes.
So
Scott, do you need a Zoom link for next Friday, or will you be here in person?
I should be back. One last follow-up from the minutes from last one. We were supposed to get I think a readout from Charlton on what it would take. I don't want to belabor it on this meeting, but just a follow-up maybe for the next meeting.
All right, so 27th, we'll meet with updated financials on the assumptions. The 4th, Desiree, you've already got lined up Folly
Yes,
to
sir.
come, and the 11th, Edisto to come. And I'll reach out to the mayors to see if they want to join you. This is staff joining at this point, right?
Yes.
Staff, okay. I'll reach out to that. Everybody good? Next
So
few
just in
meetings?
terms
Yep.
of assumptions that we're going to add, I mean, this is this is tying some ranges to the state and federal funding options.
Correct. I think that's all we're looking for
Okay.
next.
And include the timeline that we
The timeline.
distributed
Yeah, the
at the
timeline.
last meeting,
Would it-
and
We kind of
the,
have standing documents, the timeline, the kind of agreed to bullet points, recommendations. Do you all want us to just have that in the packet kind of every time so we can?
I think
as a-
moving forward, yes. and
Okay.
Just
then-
have that, we'll
Getting
add
closer.
Right,
the,
and
we'll add
the-
the new business in
And
front
then
of
what
it.
Stephen had provided,
Mhm.
right,
Yeah.
so basically what we're trying to do is fine tune the packet and
Yeah.
any remaining questions that are still outstanding so that we can
Yeah.
make sure that we get this, clearly from this model, the sooner we can start to have some decisions made on various revenue sources, the better.
So going forward, we'll put all that in every packet and just insert kind of behind the agenda, the new,
What's new?
That
the
would be
new for that.
awesome.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, is there any reason why, I mean, I understand the theory of building it up and coming to the conclusion of a giant recommendation, but it seems inevitable that the recommendation for some of the new changes that we've talked about, not how to protect the beach, but more along the lines of business license and operating beach license and those things, seems like something that makes sense to do. Is there a reason why that can't be recommended sooner in order to implement it, to get it started?
No.
Do you want us to work on
Just
a list of those
timing of
things?
everything else. I mean, we're looking at a very narrow piece of everything that's happening. But so there's,
And I guess
some of
that-
these are pretty quick,
Yeah.
to your question, Dan. Franchise fees would take a little bit of work, increasing parking, increasing business license,
So,
just a vote.
do you?
On the, and Philip, tell me if I'm wrong, but the comprehensive list presented to council, we may, some may be more palatable than others, and some may, wouldn't, some of them may not get anywhere.
Right.
I think
Right.
having the whole list holistically together to present is gonna be better than piecemealing it, probably.
Cindy, what do you?
All I was gonna ask, again, this is not being on council, I don't know how this works, but is this the sort of information, we have this packet ready and we wanna make our presentation, is this will be in a regular meeting, or should we ask for some sort of a extended meeting or anything like that?
I think it'd just be a regular meeting. We can control the agenda to some extent and
Yeah,
narrow it.
it could be a workshop.
Yeah.
The council has a workshop the first Tuesday of every month, and then a regular meeting. Usually, new items are introduced at the workshop. Council also has the ability to call for a special meeting if it's to discuss a specific issue, so that's another option.
So, again, I leave that to y'all and Katie, but it seems to me like this might be an issue where now we percolated it up to a point where it might be worth either a workshop and then the regular meeting or a special meeting to really dig in and so that we can get some results and be ready for the budget, that's all. So if y'all can talk about that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, again, we're trying to balance it, there's
We got
another.
other things, right,
Well,
I
there's
know,
another
that's why
committee
I-
that's been working for 7 or 8 months. It's about ready to come to council as well with a laundry list of to-dos and asks and requests. So just trying not to overload.
Right, and that's what I'm worried about, is we could be dismissed
I
because they're
know,
overloaded.
yeah.
So that's why I'm trying to look with some foresight to what would be enough and not too much.
So everybody's good with the next 3 weeks at this point? Okay. No further business?
Great.
Want to adjourn? All right. Douglas, you want to take us
Yeah.
off? 10:28 off record.
Hold tight.
10:28-ish.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Scott.
Scott.